The infamous Pentastar tick. This is a fairly common issue with the 3.6 litre Pentastar V6 engine, as the small needle bearings inside the rollers on the rocker arms wear out, and the excessive play then creates a ticking noise that you can hear through the rocker covers. One of the issues with a bad rocker arm, if left unchecked for long enough, it will eventually wear into the camshaft. These engines have 4 of them, so you can imagine it would get pretty expensive when you have to start replacing the cams. This was one of the main reasons why I wanted to pull our one apart and just inspect everything, but after thinking about it, the amount of work that's involved just to pull it apart to inspect it, it's easier to just go ahead and replace the rockers and the lifters at the same time while inspecting the cam, and then you know that everything is good as gold. I will say that I am not a qualified mechanic, and this is my first rodeo when it comes to doing this repair, so take my advice with a grain of salt. We started on the passenger side of the Jeep, which meant removing the air intake, then the top of the air filter box, the air filter, and then the lower section pops straight out. With the battery disconnected and out of the way, the next step is to start removing the little Christmas tree clips that hold the wiring in place, as well as the bolts that hold the battery tray. The whole point of this is we need to get the battery tray out of the way to gain access to the side of the valve cover. One thing that I was doing fairly often during this removal stage was taking photos and videos of the wiring or just different bits and pieces and the layout to see which wires go where, what ones go over, what ones go under, and this definitely came in handy when it came time to put everything back together. With some kind words and a little bit of gentle persuasion, the Christmas tree clips will come out fairly easy. I did break, I think, about 2 over the entire job, so nothing too crazy. I would recommend buying some just to have them on hand for when you put everything back together. Part of the process for being able to remove the battery tray is to get the fuse box loosened and out of the way. So there's a main power cord that comes into it, you'll have to remove that, and then there are 4 tabs that hold it into a mount that you can just use a flathead screwdriver to pop them to the side and then lift the fuse box up. After that, I removed the evap lines, which nothing too crazy here, just an electrical plug that you need to disconnect, And then the lines themselves have a safety clip, and then you can squeeze the connector and pop the lines off. Alrighty, so with all the Christmas trees gone and the wiring loose, you can now pull the fuse box up and out of the way to get to the battery tray. One thing that I did find helpful here was to have a bungee cord to hold the fuse box up and out of the way. Just one less thing to have to worry about. With a little bit of wiggling and finesse, you'll be able to slip the battery tray out. Just be careful, there are a lot of things to get snagged on here, so don't go at it like a china in a bull shop. The heater hoses need to be disconnected and moved out of the way. So just remember, make sure you've got something to catch the coolant underneath before you start pulling things apart. Around this time is about when I would take another round of photos and videos, just to be able to get an idea of where the hoses are and all of that, where the clips go. Trust me, you'll thank yourself for it when you start putting everything back together. This electrical connector can be a little bit tricky the first time, but if you pull the safety tab back, squeeze the sides of the grey part of the connector, push it forward slightly, and then you should be able to slide it back. One thing that I didn't do as much on the passenger side in comparison to the driver's side was using zip ties to hold things up and out of your way. You'll really thank yourself for it. It's like having an extra pair of hands, and it just makes your life so much easier. Once the mounting bracket for the heater hoses and a couple other things is out of the way, you can then start disconnecting the connections to the coil packs and can continue removing some of those delightful Christmas trees that hold the wiring loom in place. I'm not sure how common this is on other models, but you'll see the protective plastic over the wiring loom is pretty brittle and had fallen off in quite a few places. I ended up replacing a fair amount of this when we started putting everything back together. Something that I discovered while removing all of this was the main power cable going to the alternator had been rubbing on the breather hose that comes off of the airbox. It actually got to the point where it was starting to go through the insulation. So it was a pretty lucky find. I would recommend just taking a quick look to make sure that your one is okay, as it could create a whole bunch of other issues later on down the road. Time to tackle the PCV valve. There's a lot of hype, well, I don't know if you'd call it hype, but there's no shortage of people online saying how terrible of a job this is, and to be fair, they're not wrong. Although, with a little bit of patience and the right tool, you'll get it off, no worries. It was around this point in the process that I placed some labels on the workbench showing the front of the engine, the intake, and the exhaust side. The main reason for this is every time that I removed a part, I would lay it out in the exact orientation that it was removed. This step becomes a little more critical later on when removing the cam bearing caps, but I think it's just good practice. It also makes your life a lot easier, takes the guesswork out of it, and you know that everything's going back in the exact same way. Something that'll help make your life a little bit easier is anytime you remove a nut or a bolt, try to put it back in the spot that it came from. This, for one, just helps with not losing it, and also it takes the guesswork out of where it goes. Once you've got the cam solenoids removed, the camshaft sensor, and the PCV valve, you can start to unthread the bolts that hold the cover in place. These bolts are captured, so you don't have to worry about them coming all the way out. You will have to gently pry on the cover to loosen it, as there is a seam on the head that has some RTV sealant installed over from the factory. Once the rocker cover is loose, you will have to push it back slightly towards the firewall, as it needs to clear the end of the camshaft where the PCV valve attaches to. When you are removing the rocker cover, this is where, if you tied things up and out of the way earlier, you'll thank yourself for it because it makes it so much easier. I changed the engine oil in the Jeep regularly, and you can see it paying off here by how clean everything is. Alrighty, the next step in the process is to get the engine resting at top dead center. You do this by using a 27mm socket and either a breaker bar or a ratchet, and rotate the crank until the two lines on the cam phases line up with each other. Determining top dead center on the left bank, or the driver's side of the vehicle, is a little bit different, as the cam phases have an arrow that line up and not a line, but you'll see that in the next video. With the two lines on the cam phasers lining up with each other, you may need to use a crescent wrench on the camshaft to just wiggle it a little bit before you'll be able to slip the block in place that then locks the cam phasers together. You'll see there's a specific spot on the camshaft for putting the crescent. Just be careful, don't go putting it anywhere willy-nilly and causing any damage. Don't be lazy like I was and pick up your rubber mallet instead of using your hand as a hammer. With everything locked into place, go ahead and use some brake cleaner and clean the area down. The reason for this is you want to mark some reference points in case things go south, you'll be able to put everything back together. So what I'm marking here is the relation between the timing chain and the cam phaser. You'll also see there is a small dimple on the camshaft. I put a mark on the cam cap behind this, so that way we should have our bases covered. Once you're satisfied with your marks, you can go ahead and loosen the oil control valve bolts. For this you'll need a 36mm socket and either a breaker bar or a ratchet. These are on pretty tight, so I would recommend using a crescent as a backup. If you solely rely on the plastic block, I think there's a high chance you'd just strip the teeth off it. Once the bolts are cracked loose, you can use one of the tools that come in the special kit to push it down and depress the plunger that's holding tension on the timing chain. You'll see that there is a trim tool that I've wedged down in there. That's because the timing chain guide is on a pin, and I was concerned that it may slip off, so this was just for a little bit of peace of mind. With the tension removed, I then went ahead and loosened the cam cap bolts. I did one cam at a time just to make life a little bit easier. With the bolts loose, you can go ahead and remove the cam caps. The caps are stamped to show their location, but the labels on the workbench just help to lay them out in the correct order. You may need to wiggle the cam phaser a little bit. Those dimples I mentioned earlier are a keyway that help locate the two together. With the cam removed, I was able to do a visual inspection and everything looked really good. With the cam now out of the way, you can go ahead and remove the rocker arms and the lifters. There are 6 of each underneath each cam. I checked the rollers on the rocker arms as I removed them, and thankfully none of them were too bad. I had the new rocker arms and lifters soaking in fresh engine oil while I was dismantling everything. With all of the new lifters in, you can go ahead and install the rockers as well. I spun the roller on the rockers as I installed them just to make sure that it was running smoothly. Before putting the camshaft back in, cover all the surfaces with assembly lube, including the rollers on the rocker arms and the camshaft itself. This will help for the initial startup to make sure everything runs smooth. Stick around and don't go anywhere. On the next episode, we'll be continuing with the right bank, finishing it up and putting it back together, and then moving over to the left bank. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.